Hello everyone, I will try to make this brief and to the point, and everything that I forget because I'm doing this out of memory will be out in the description eventually. But I still have something interesting to say about the development of this project and the decisions that made it be what it is. So let's start now. So you will notice here that I start in 1969. So what's the deal with that? I wanted to start with 1967 because that's the date of the first single, or at least the first professional recording of the band. And I struggled doing that because there weren't any images of the 1967 release, but there was one for the 1968 release. So that's pretty interesting. I decided to not include singles, so that's the reason why they aren't in the video. But the point was that I wanted to include everything from Genesis, and that will probably happen in the future. But for now, I included lots of stuff that the other members didn't have as an option. And you will see what I mean by the decisions, because some feel very weird. But let's continue. So right out of the bat, we have Arc 2 from Flaming Youth. And well, people were asking me, why is the Flaming Youth important? Well, I think that I wanted to include this because it's like the first solo thing that happened around this time with a Genesis member, even though it's before Genesis. So I thought that it was interesting to put things into perspective, more or less. Okay, so here we have something. I paused because I had to sneeze. Well, anyways, here you see that I included a live album, and this is something that I didn't do for any solo member because Tony Banks doesn't have any live albums, so you know, it was going to be a little unfair there. The other thing that might surprise you is that the music beats are very short, and that it's done in order to avoid copyright. So the video can still be up for every country. And the other thing is the snippets I have been including are instrumentals. You will notice that throughout the video, and I will comment because there is one mistake. So let's continue. As you can see, I added this note that says featuring Mike and Phil, and this is very interesting because you will see that many early solo albums feature other members. But you will also notice, and this is something that people have commented, like, why is Tony Banks not helping anyone and whatever? Tony Banks, or some people have said, why is Tony Banks not playing with Steve Hackett or vice versa or whatever? Tony Banks never played with anyone outside Genesis. Never. That's another interesting point that you have to notice. And he's the one that never played live and that never played with anyone outside Genesis. So you know, that's important, I guess. And that differentiates him a bit from the other members that you will see later down this list. Well, let's continue. I hit the wrong button. Okay. Here's another thing that people have commented me, that why Brand X was important. Well, Brand X and Genesis overlapped quite a bit. and it's pretty interesting. And well, Brand X, it's also a nice band. It's a nice complement to with Genesis. If you want to listen to Genesis, I also encourage you to listen to Brand X. You will hear some Supreme playing done by Phil Collins, mostly, and he was kind of a founder member. He wasn't for the first session, but he was for the next ones, and he was on this very first album release that they did. I remember people commenting that he looked like Phil Collins. You know, I have to stop these tangents because this video will be very long. But that's the thing. Brand X, I think that's very important, and I should have probably mentioned here that it's a Phil Collins thing. So let's continue. Okay, so here is the first EP, and this is another thing that I don't know if other Genesis members solo in their solo career have EPs, but here we have one from Genesis, and there is another one later, and well, this is the last one that to have Steve Hackett as an active member. So the other members left doing albums. Well, Steve left doing a live album, but I decided to include here because I think that he wasn't credited with mixing the live album. I think that he did. You know what? I didn't do that amount of research. In fact, there are some things that I actually did by memory, like the Tony Banks solo career stuff, and you will see why that was a problem. So let's continue. Here we have our first album that doesn't feature any Genesis member whatsoever, and I included it anyways. I don't even like this one for some reason. It's odd that I like most Brand X albums, but I don't like this one. It doesn't click with me as much as the others that feature Phil. I don't know. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But I decided to include it because I wanted to include the entire Brand X discography. I felt like including just the bits that feature Phil was going to look a bit incomplete. I mean, this was a very great time. Fun. Genesis and good electronic. Favorite Phil Collins album. The others I don't care so much. Okay, so here I have an indication. I actually wanted to include the Time Stopped in Milton Keynes. I don't know how to pronounce that one, but that's Steve Hackett did a song based on the reunion, the Six of the Best reunion. And well, I did actually include it on the edit, but it sounded so weird, and it didn't fit with the with the rest of the album, because the rest of the album is like the one I included. So some of my decisions were actually made in order to represent the album better, but in other ways I think that I just handicapped this album. I think that the track I chose wasn't really that great. It was a thing of representing the sound. And by the way, this thing I chose for Acting Very Strange was very hard, because all the album has voice. It's all sung by Mike Rutherford, and this is the only song that has a long enough instrumental to be included on this list. There is also something I have to comment, that some Brand X albums were done in the same session, and I think that this one and the previous one were done around the same time. They did 2 albums out of one of the making of one, so you know. Okay, I keep pausing, but here I wanted to include Mama. When I started the project, actually, before deciding on doing everything instrumental. So I started the project and I was choosing like 2 tracks per album for every Genesis album. I wasn't even close to do the single thing, and these kind of decisions made this video took longer, actually, because I was adding stuff and I wasn't actually completing anything. And here I had Mama, and on Invisible Touch I had, of course, Invisible Touch. I wanted to represent the albums the best I could, but then I decided, you know what, I need to do instrumentals. And then after doing the instrumentals, I decided I need strong instrumentals that represent the sound of the album. And that's how we left here. But at the same time, there are mistakes that I made. So let's continue. This is a great album, by the way. Anthony knows how to do pop. What a great time. Everyone having #1 single, including GTR here. Every Genesis member outside are inside. Okay, so here is a big mistake. This is what happens when you start doing things automatically and out of memory. This is 1989. For some reason I thought that it was 1986. So usually what I do when I watch this video is, when I reach this part and I know that it's coming, I actually do this, and it's like nothing happened, you know, because there is this Tony Banks album that's correct. It's 1986 and it's a great album, and no hits. Well, here we have a big hit that displays Genesis and GTR, of course, the biggest hit that Steve Hackett had. And if I include Brand X, I had to include GTR. Of course, I wanted to show the dominance that the band had. And here we have no album releases in 1987. Well, there is, I said, it's a byproduct of the disclaimer of no soundtracks, no whatever. Yes, I think that there was a Peter Gabriel soundtrack around this time, so I skipped that one. But let's see. That's probably for another time. Yeah, okay. okay. Here we have a big mistake, or a small mistake actually. I tried to get the most pristine album covers, and this one has Steve Hackett's signature. And that was another thing. I had to decide on the track, and I had to decide on the album covers. And I tried to get them very, I mean, like the most official looking ones. And this album had many edits, and you know, there are many mistakes in the albums that I found on Google and DuckDuckGo, whatever. And I chose this one because this one looked the most uniform, but then I realized, oh no, it had the signature and it has this dent here. So a mistake, and a small mistake, but still it felt weird for me. And the other thing is, I mean, what was the other thing I had to comment? I can't remember. Okay. Oh, I remember. On the creating process of this video, Steve Hackett, I hadn't listened to his entire discography, and I had a hard time deciding on what was necessary, and it took a lot of time to listen to every album and every song in the discography. Steve Hackett and Anthony Phillips have a long history of music and albums, and Anthony Phillips has the private person pieces that they decided to not include because most of them sounded very similar, because most of them are demos. So it was hard to decide all of this, you know. So I'm sorry, Ant fans. My favorite Mike and the Mechanics album. This album is. By the way, in the original version of this, I actually made a mistake with this album today, but I corrected it. Even though Phil left in 1996, his last big contribution to an album was that one. If I include singles, that will mean Phil stopped contributing in 93, and if I had left live playings, that would have been very similar too. I decided to include this change of Mike Cliff on the house because it's interesting. So, well, I could have ended Brand X earlier because the last two albums aren't that great. Especially the last one. Oh my god, that's absolutely horrible looking cover. But, well, I actually like this album. Similar to what's the name of Fire Youth? How can I forget the name? Well, Flaming Youth. I decided to include this Ray Wilson release. Also, I was born in '94, and Steve Hackett released his worst album at that moment. Well, I don't like blues. If you like, you do you. And this is a cool album. And this is a great album. Wow! I think that it was a little unfair here because that's the best track that Tony Banks did in his solo career, probably. And the Strictly Inc. All the other songs aren't like this one, but they are still good songs. I love Strictly Inc., but I think that I just did like the best thing ever on to represent an album that's really good, but not the best thing ever. Well, someone commented that this song sounded like Afterglow, by the way. This is my least favorite Phil Collins album, and similar to Acting Very Strange, I had a hard time finding instrumentals. By the way, I will have to speed this video because it's been taking too long, so let's hear it in 2x. I don't like the first revisited album. The second one is excellent. That one is very cool. I wish they could do another album. They probably have played again and tried to do another album, but they will never release anything. I think that they are waiting to to pass away, probably, because there are artists that pass and then release stuff because they left the stuff for their families. There are hints of that, but well, whatever. I will miss them very much if that happens. So I don't want to think about that. Horrible album. Okay, so Dark Town has some pretty cool tracks that sound like earlier Steve Hackett, but I decided to include that one because it represents the sound that he was looking for much better. By the way, here we have a shout out to the Genesis archive. After they left the calling on the stations, Ray Wilson and I think that Nerd Sidkiahu, I don't know how to pronounce it, they decided to play here and do that. I have that one. Oddly enough, in the 2000s, they decided to re-release stuff from 1986 because Steve Hackett had this. He was doing that for GTR, songs that he had for GTR for a second album. And the previous Archive 2 featured 86 stuff. Well, you know what happened at GM. These releases are very weird, and you can look at Peter Gabriel in the back. I never noticed back then. This is a good album, by the way. Another good album. This one, oh my god, has narration over the tracks, narrated by Gilly Smith. So it was hard to again find instrumentals in there, but whatever. Well, it seems that Steve Hackett and Tony Banks decided to both to do orchestra stuff. They had very different approaches towards that because Steve Hackett still used the guitar, and Tony Banks decided to not include the keyboard on his orchestra stuff. So that's really interesting. Well, and of course, you got Epping Forested again. Of course you did. Well, I think that we have reached this point of the video, and Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel had too few releases. They didn't have that many as I expected, and I decided to buff Tony Banks' releases with soundtracks and compilations because he also has not many releases. But that means a problem because I took that decision towards Tony Banks' releases, but then when I was finishing the video, I realized, wow, Phil Collins has even less than Tony Banks. And if I had included the soundtracks for Disney or whatever, I would have been fine. But well, that's the thing that I found was a bit unfair, that I took that decision. But at the same time, that was my appreciation, that Tony Banks had too little releases. But anyways, you will see more later. Another mistake that I just realized, look at this. There is this sticker on the front. By the way, this Bionic and the Mechanics The Road album, I couldn't find any high quality cover album, if I remember correctly. It was horrible. This was the better quality one, and it was and even then it was very small compared to all the others in this compilation. This Genesis song remakes features some new music pieces in between. That's true, and I wasn't sure to include the Genesis Revisited stuff at first. The first album included new songs that Steve Hackett said that they were from the past, but whatever. Those are still new songs because nobody had listened to them, and they were produced from scratch for that album. But this one included some pieces. Okay, I wasn't thinking of including it, and the same goes for the next one because it doesn't feel like a Steve Hackett album, and well, it's a band. It's like what am I saying? A small duo, you know. I almost forgot it, but at the same time, when I saw it and listened to it, I wasn't sure to include it. I didn't like it very much. This is beautiful. What a bad release, but that's why I decided to include Who Done It as a joke. This is a good release. In 2016, nobody released albums except Ray Wilson that decided to do two for some reason. He was inspired, and by the way, Steve Hackett and Ray Wilson will complete their releases, with Tony Banks in a few places. And Mike, who, well, he released this one. Well, I wish they released stuff this day. This album, it's a compilation of remade songs, and has a few new songs, and the new songs are really bad. And I decided to include this new song. They barely featured instrumental sections. Of course, 2020. I think that nothing happened in 2020. I just released a compilation of videos that Ray Wilson and Steve Hackett did for YouTube on my third channel. That will probably get taken down, but whatever. That's all that happened really, because concerts were cancelled and all of that happened, you know. And of course, The Last Domino was announced in 2020, but they played in 2021. I don't like how the covers look on the Steve Hackett albums nowadays. It's like they have the name, a cool picture in between. That I liked how they look, the picture, but and the title down there. They look like small talk thumbnails. I don't know. Well, whatever. This looks great in comparison. Okay, so this is another thing that happened. Well, it's a sad thing that happened, but again, another member of Brand X died this year, I think, of 2023. But in 2023, early 2023, they decided to reform Brand X and to release some previously unreleased 1975 stuff. So there is only one member left, and they need the blessing of Phil Collins. So let's see what happens. Also, they had the blessing from Steve Hackett, even though he wasn't on the band, but he did a video for the Gorilla Productions YouTube channel, so that's interesting, I guess. And now, the BBC broadcast, that audio not from the box set. For some reason, nobody has released the box set audio on YouTube. Or maybe it is blocked for me because I live in Latin America, South America, I mean. And Peter Gabriel is, it's still releasing stuff from this album. Steve Hackett, which I went to see live this year, and I won't tell you when, because you will guess my country, but you will probably guess it anyways. I should talk more about that. It was a great experience, but I will do so in another time. But for now, I didn't watch Foxtrot, of course. I watched Seconds Out. It was great, with genetics. Anthony Phillips released Wildlife, and one of his bandmates, did another album recently. You can check all of this on his webpage, and of course I recommend also checking Steve Hackett's and Ray Wilson's webpage, for that matter. Genesis, Mike Rutherford, and are very inactive on the webpage, and Tony Banks and Phil Collins don't use a webpage at all, so there you know. Well, this tour was very small, and at the drop of Genesis included Jesus He Knows Me, which was great with Nick Collins. So, it already ended, and the page is stuck like that. And Ray Wilson is on tour, also playing some Genesis songs. He's still on tour, and I'm glad that tours are back. I always like to look at the Genesis archive. I think that's the page. Maybe it's the other page, the movement page has, still has this calendar with tours. It's a little not updated because it doesn't feature Ray Wilson, and Steve Hackett moved his dates, and that's not updated at all. But still, it was a great thing to see every day that calendar, and on 2020 that stopped, and it was very sad. And nowadays it feels like everything is coming to normal. For a while it's been like that, but I'm glad that Ray Wilson and Steve Hackett are on tour still. And I decided to end with this note, and that's where we are now. I expect more, It feels like it doesn't need to end like that, but if it does, it's been a very long run, but whatever. I feel grateful for what Genesis has done, and I feel great this is the kind of video I wanted to see someone else do it, and I decided to do it myself, and I feel great for have done it. I am the one who done it, and thanks for watching, and take care. I will probably do a follow-up through the decades video, including singles and live presentations. I have another compilation in the making. But until then, see you next time. Have a great time, a great week, a great year.